Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by Denim. As a business owner myself, I personally know the importance of financial stability and preserving cash flow to help navigate through any freight market. With Denim's comprehensive service offering, you now have an all-in-one financial partner whose platform includes factoring, payments, freight audit, document collection management, and analytics, which help keep your business financially healthy and increase your team's time to focus on revenue-producing activities. You can also take advantage of Denim's free credit check, which they perform on all of your customers. And Denim will proactively reach out to you if they spot any signs of credit deterioration. Finally, Denim always pays your carriers first. As a broker, this is imperative to preserving your credit score in the market, which ultimately helps you become a broker of choice to your carrier partners. Are you ready to learn more? Visit denim.com to schedule a demo today. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. We got a very special guest for you guys here today. It's very timely that this conversation is happening, and we're actually talking about this today and tomorrow. But we're going to be talking, kind of about what's going on at the ports and some of these accessorials and what's going to happen out there, and kind of like the framework about what some people can do. So I have the founder of 411 LLC. I have the founder of 411 LLC, Sara Dandan, on the show to break it all down. So Sara, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
No, I'm looking forward to this. It is kind of a timely conversation. But no, it's just like we've been connected on LinkedIn for a while now, and I see your comments and stuff like that out there a lot. Now, I forget what it was here a couple of weeks ago that I had read, but I'm just like, now I got to get her on the show. And then I didn't even know you were a founder of your company too. So it's a double win, because I always love talking to founders about their stuff. But before we get into any of that, Sara, how did you get your start in the industry? What brought you into transportation?
Well, my dad owned his own forwarding business, and before that he was in procurement, and his brother before that was in the industry. And I had graduated from college, and I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And he said, well, why don't you come work for me? And I was a little reticent at first because, working for family. But, I jumped in, and, I had a kind of an inkling of what I was getting into, just from watching him and going to his office when I was growing up. But I found quickly that I loved it. We complain all the time about how it's so stressful, but we're all kind of, I guess, slaves to it. We're stress junkies.
Yeah.
we love putting out those fires, and you kind of, you thrive on that. And, it got its hooks in me, and here I am today.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It is like there is no dull moment in this industry, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there in other industries who say the same thing. But it's like, at least for me, like there's so much that's out of everybody's control, right? When it comes down to it, right? Weather, traffic, production issues, raw material, whatever it looks like, and it all kind of factors in to a lot of it. But because before we started recording, you were talking that switched into, you do a little bit of forwarding still, but you've now really switched into the disputes side of things. So like, what brought you to start 411?
Uh, well, I've always been known for my strongly worded letters. You know, as long as I can remember, friends and everybody else would ask me for help in writing things like that and arguing things. And, naturally being a forwarder, we didn't have a lot of D&D, but, it was something I was pretty good at. And I helped a couple of friends, in the industry out with it. And it just kind of went from there, I guess. I had previous extensive experience with um, EAR and ITAR and OFAC regulations and interpreting them. And so the regulation side of it, I guess, isn't wasn't too difficult. I don't want to minimize it, of course, but just having had that experience with those governmental regulations, I was able to kind of just, dive in and really start advocating for people from a place of knowledge and
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah, I think that, and especially with a lot of the updates with the FMC's newest ruling and everything, it kind of like changed how everything was done. So like, what really caused that, right? Where the FMC's like, we got to kind of revamp how a lot of these fees are even being reported.
Well, it was something that shippers complained about for a long time, and I think, rightfully so. If you've ever shipped, I don't care if it's, on the BCO side or if it's on the forwarder side, you know how, I'm gonna try to put it in a nice way, confusing it can be at
Yeah.
times. You know, you're told one thing and then another thing happens, or especially back in the old days, you'd receive invoices sometimes like a year later, and you'd
Mhm.
say, "What's it for?" And they'd say it's for this, and you'd say, "What? We already paid this." "Oh, but we really mean this." And so rightfully, everybody, told the FMC about this and complained about it, and there were things that, processes that had started, but I think with everything that happened during COVID and the supply chain crisis of COVID, when it really got into the public consciousness, is when it kind of just kicked everybody in the backside, and they said, "Okay, now we really, really have to ramp it up and do something," because it was becoming mainstream news that all of these businesses were being charged so many of these fees, and there was nothing they could do, to prevent these fees accumulating, and the carriers were raking in billions and billions of dollars. So I think that was kind of like the push that they really needed to, um, you know, actually like cement these things. Uh, it's unfortunate it took that, but we are
Mhm.
where we are now, and it's not perfect, but it's a little bit better, I think.
Yeah. So essentially, just to kind of explain what this looks like. So in the past, the vessel would charge the port, or the vessel would bill the forwarder, and then the port would charge the carrier, sometimes for the exact same thing. Is that what was kind of happening?
I It was happening a whole bunch of different ways, you know what I mean? And it kind of still is. You would usually get a bill from the carrier, and you would get a bill from the terminal, and sometimes it would be clear why you were being charged. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes you would go to pick up your container, and they'd say, "No, you can't because you owe the carrier," and you're like, "I do." And the terminal has their own bill that they're making you pay, and then you're trying to deal with the carrier. And I mean, that's still happening today to some extent, and I think it's actually a little bit worse. with the new rules now that the carriers have like allegedly taken over the billing, it's created kind of a whole new kind of mess. But it was just, it was kind of the billing was insane. I mean, I wasn't joking when I said sometimes you would get invoices a year plus later and it would say detention on it, and you'd say, but I paid detention. Oh, well, that's really a chassis charge. Okay,
Yeah.
but it says detention on the bill. So, I mean, that's a lot of what the FMC was trying to clear up with their new final rule on billing. And I think as far as the invoices themselves go, it helps. But as far as what's going on at the terminals and the ports, it's created kind of a whole new mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it seems, because from my perspective, it's like, the does the port own, and I guess I'm trying to make it as simplistic here as possible for a lot of people who are just kind of hearing about this for the first time, because like with everything that's possibly going to happen next week, I think some of this stuff is going to possibly get really out of hand. So like when they're a chassis fee, for example, so does the port itself own the chassis, or does the carrier have a private chassis that they can use? Who decides that?
So carriers do own chassis, and there's also third-party chassis. In fact, there was a case before the FMC about the chassis because the carriers were trying to force shippers to use their chassis.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big whole thing, and the FMC was like, you can't really do that, So when it comes down to billing people, usually the carrier themselves will bill, and then the terminal will bill for D&D. And as far as chassis go, it depends on what chassis you're using. I have some shippers who don't want to use carrier chassis, and they'll specify that. But so the carrier, though, however, will usually like pass that bill through or pass that bill on.
Okay.
I guess is an easy way to put it.
Yeah, because it's I think like the level of complexity, I don't know. I personally think from my perspective that this was made way more complex than it needs to be, right? Because it's like I
Yeah.
look at it like this. There's the vessel, the ship itself, there's the freight forwarder, there's the shipper, the customer, whatever here stateside, then there's the port, right? So it's like if there's any detent or accessorials that the vessel incurs, because it's like, are they the ones who own the actual containers that the cargo's loaded in, or does somebody else own them and then they're getting billed? The vessel itself is getting billed from the owner of the container itself.
Well, usually, okay, there's so many variables in
Yeah,
all of
no, I
this.
know.
That's what makes it difficult. So usually, so if you book, let's say with I don't know, just MSC, and I'm not picking on them, it's just the
Yeah,
first thing that came to my mind. Let's say you book with MSC, so, sometimes they own the containers outright, sometimes they do like lease them. Um, but you're booking space on the vessel. So it's that carrier. So let's say the carrier is MSC, like pretty much everything is coming from MSC, and it usually gets passed to the forwarder or the MVO, and then it gets passed on, it gets passed on, it gets passed on. What was happening though, too, as we all know at the ports, was that truckers were getting charged for D&D at the port, and they were being forced to pay it on behalf of whomever they were going to pick it up for. If they didn't, the carriers would lock them out. And what that means for people who don't know that is that they would tell them, if you don't pay this bill, you can't pick up any containers for any of your customers, and we're
yeah.
basically like shutting your business down. And that's what in part what the final rule on D&D was supposed to fix. It hasn't really, honestly. So basically, it's the carrier, and what a lot of people don't know is that the carriers own a lot of the ports and a lot of the terminals. So it's basically the same entity, but they're just kind of separated. But what we're having now is that the carriers will say, "Go ask the terminal," and the terminal is like, "Go ask the carrier." I mean, they're both the same company in a lot of cases, but they're
When
kind
you
of,
when you specify carrier right now, you're talking about the actual ocean carrier, not the trucking companies here, because I think that I just want to, I knew what you were getting at there, but I wanted to, make that a clear separation here. We're not talking about the trucking companies as the carrier. She's just, talking about the ocean carriers that own the terminal at the port itself, correct?
yeah, I'll always, just to clarify, I'll just call the carriers, I'm referring to the ocean carriers. And then when I'm talking about trucking carriers, I'll always just call them truckers. I think
Okay.
that makes it easier for a lot of people.
No, for sure. But I just, because I normally talk trucking, excuse me, over the road here on my show.
Yeah,
So it's like when we bring that in, I know that there's a lot of cross terminology out there. So
yeah.
I don't want some of these guys making any mistakes out there about what's going on with it. Because yeah, I mean it's just kind of wild to me. It really is out there about the amount, like the complexity that it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be this complex for a lot of this stuff. And this can't make your job easy, right? So it's like, from when we're talking D&D, detention and demurrage, obviously, like, what is that? Just for clarification for anybody out there, what is detention? Because that is different than demurrage, and how are they different?
So, so demurrage is when it's taking you basically too long to pick up a container at the port, they charge you for that. If you go over, everybody gets a certain amount of free days,
Mhm.
and that's a new thing that's popped up where there are different free day numbers showing up. The carrier will give you a certain free day, and the port will give you another free day. And the truckers are kind of having difficulty with that one because,
Yeah.
all right, great. We're trying to get this thing out, and there's different free days, and they're moving around, and it's a whole thing. So demurrage is basically the charges that accrue if you have not picked it up in time. So
Yeah.
you've used up your free days. It's sitting there. They charge you for that. Detention is not returning the container in time. They charge you for that because, of course, that's a container that is not in use, and they want it to be in use. There are legitimate, you know, um, charges by the carriers for D&D. Some shippers just pick things up slowly, some, return them slowly, and those charges are valid and legitimate. But there are a lot of instances where there's literally nothing the forwarder or the shipper can do. And those are the instances where you are not supposed to be charged, but you are charged anyway, and then you have to go and you have to fight it.
Hey guys, before we go any further in this episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by TIE Software, the battle station for freight brokers. Your TMS should be viewed as a tool to help you execute at a high level in any freight market. With TIE, brokers gain access to a comprehensive platform that has rate intelligence and quoting history converged down to a single screen. TIE also equips your team with all the data they need to confidently negotiate pricing, while also allowing them to communicate directly with both carriers and customers from a single command center. With most of your tasks automated through multiple integrations, your team can focus on making strategic decisions and not manual ones. Are you looking to revolutionize your brokerage by giving them a competitive advantage through automation? Visit www.tiesoftware.com/battlestation to learn more. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. Mhm. So, yeah, because that's one thing that, I think is asking that information on the front end, right? Like, a piece of advice I would give to anybody out there who's moving or thinking about moving drayage or offering that as a service is when you get that master bill of lading, ask the forwarder right away, what is the, demurrage? Like, what's the free days? Is it 2? Is it 4? It seems like it's pretty standard for a 4-day out there. Is it kind of, I would just label that as a general rule of thumb. And then from the detention standpoint, I've seen it like 20 days. Like, you got up to like 20 days to get it delivered and brought back to the port and stuff like that. But again, I would ask a lot of that information as soon as you get the bill of lading from the freight forwarder. I would highly recommend any brokers or any shippers or manufacturers who are listening to this show right now, as soon as you get that information, ask about that. Get the last free day, and then also get the detention window on that as well, because it could be 10 days, it could be 20 days. It really depends specifically on the ocean carrier itself who sets all of that. But you will know that, and this will save you a lot of time on the back end. And then furthermore, document literally everything. I would highly recommend, do not have a phone call. All right. Email everything, have a paper
Yep.
trail that's going here, because this is going to make Sarah's job a hell of a lot easier in the event that something comes to light here later down the road, that you have a paper trail about what's being told.
You're exactly right. And that's what I tell everybody too. Document, 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 and don't do phone calls. Because at the end of the day, the dispute process on my end is a legal process. And it's not what happened, it's what you can prove happened.
Yeah.
And, you could have been, a victim of circumstance, 100 times over. It doesn't matter unless you have proof of it. And I mean, emails between you and your brokers or your truckers, emails between you and the carrier. Save all of that always. I mean, I think you should anyway.
Mhm.
Um, all of your invoices, all of your billing, anything and everything related to shipments, I would keep and I would document. And that's probably my biggest hurdle, is that people will come to me and they'll explain things to me. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, yeah, you've got a good case. Okay, now where's your evidence? Oh, I don't have any. Well, do you have, emails between you and so and this, that, or the other? Oh no, I just called. Well, then I've had to say to them, well, we're not going to be able to fight it then, because we have to be able to prove that what you're saying is correct. And, unfortunately, the burden of proof is on you, unless it's a charge complaint. And even with the charge complaints, though, in my experience, although the burden of proof is supposed to be on the ocean carrier, oftentimes it's been left up to the complainant,
Mhm.
aka the shipper. So
Who who sets the rates? And then is there a set rate out there now where it's like, is it $200 a day for demurrage? Like how are these rates set, or is it individually the ocean carrier themselves that are setting these?
each carrier has their own rates, and it'll usually be in their tariff. So that's another thing too. If you have a contract, if you're a shipper big enough to have a contract, you can also set those rates in your contract. But each carrier makes their own rates, and so you kind of have to be aware of what they are. And if you're big enough to have a contract, then you can set those rates in your contract. You can also set the amount of free days. There's some shippers out there that are so huge, they have infinite free days. It's not even
Mhm.
set, it's not like 20, 30, whatever. They can just, per their contract,
Yeah.
pick them up or and drop them off whenever they want to. Um, but it's hard to become a shipper that's contract worthy, especially these days. There's been a big push to put people on the spot market, because the carriers make more money on the spot market, so it makes sense. Um, but kind of that number you have to get, to that position, I guess, of power where you're making a contract and you can set those things. It's a very, very high bar
Okay.
these
No, I
days.
think that, yeah, I again, I want everybody to really take a hard listen into what Sarah's saying here right now, right? Because I think it's the element of surprise that gets a lot of people, um, in the event that you can't find somebody for, like whatever, you can't find somebody to pick up a container, and then all of a sudden, like, it's $250 a day, for hypothetical example. It's $250 a day per container, not
Yep.
per order, right? So it's like if you got 10 containers on your order, for example, and it's $250 a day, I mean, that's $2,500 a day in demurrage we're talking about here. And that's nothing else. That's just to get it removed from the port at that time, right? So it's like finding out, is the negotiation, can you negotiate on that? Can you get lower fees? Can you get more free days? I personally think everything's negotiable in this life,
Yeah.
Sarah. I really do. And I think that you have to kind of take that in there. But again, I think that there's so much. And then, especially if you don't do a high volume of
Yeah.
this, right? Maybe you're only bringing 3 containers in a month or whatever that looks like, and you're unaware of a lot of these things. These are the things that creep up. And then all of a sudden, you already paid $20,000 just to get the container here. And then you're getting $2,000 in demurrage fees, and then everything else that kind of comes along with it.
Yeah, and that's why the rules state that if it's something out of your control, you shouldn't be charged those fees. Unfortunately though, this is a big problem I come across, where there's a lot of shippers who just don't want to, um I guess, recoup those charges. And
Mhm.
I personally don't understand it because I'm the type who I'd be like, okay, well, yeah, give me my money back. I don't know if it's a burden of, if it's a burden of proof, or they're worried about having to get everything together, if they're just thinking about the time involved. I get shippers who come to me all the time and they're red hot and they're furious about it, and they want to fight it, da, 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 da. And I say, okay, let's do it. Send me everything. And then I never hear back from them, um, and it's a time consuming process sometimes, and I get that if you're busy and you've got a lot of other stuff going on, but they kind of like rely on that, I think, in that a lot of shippers, and that's the biggest thing, that's the number one biggest thing, is that not enough shippers pursue it when it occurs, and it's
Mhm.
unjust. And that's kind of allowed this environment to fester. And a big part of that is that the process has been kind of siloed away from the average Joe and the average
Mhm.
shipper. Unless you had an attorney or somebody else who you could have do this for you, the process was really kind of cut off from a lot of people. And I think that's something that the FMC recognized and has tried to rectify with the charge complaint process. But with the charge complaint process, you're still going against carrier attorneys, and the people at the FMC you're dealing with are still almost always going to be attorneys too. So even that process, like, you have to come and you have to, like, as they say, come correct.
No, for sure. I mean, there is, and I also think though that some of I don't know. Like my thing is like, is the amount not worth their time, right? Where they're like, oh, it was only $1,000, so they're like, they just don't want to
Yeah.
go back and even try and recoup that. Where it's just like, it's just easier to pay it than to
Yeah.
invest the time, because again, time is money for a lot of people, and if you look at that amount where it's $1,000, for example, and they're like, if we get our
Yeah.
attorney involved, if we go back and start breaking down everything to try and find all that information to prove our case, is it even worth our time? And I think that might add to a lot of why people don't dispute it. I'm assuming once you start hitting the tens of thousands of dollars, then that
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
probably a certain trigger amount there.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, a friend of mine on LinkedIn just last week was saying, he was kind of telling the tale of a bill, and he said it would cost us more in man hours than it would to dispute this.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a smaller one though. That was like a hundred and I think $70 or something like
Yeah.
that. And that I understand. And there have been people who have come to me and I've had to tell them, like, unfortunately, you're gonna end up paying me more than you're going to get back if you fight this. You're better off kind of fighting it yourself. So there definitely is kind of like a threshold, but that's why I think empowering shippers to be able to dispute themselves, especially those smaller things, is so important. And I think the charge complaint process is a good step towards that. But I think, we have to kind of get shippers a little bit more educated on that process, and able to kind of give them the tools to be able to go and do that effectively.
I know we're almost up on time here, but I wanna put this in. What's the forwarder's role in all of this? Is the forwarder getting billed from the ocean carrier and then they're passing that along, or is the forwarder billing in anticipation that they think that might happen? How does that, like, what's their role in this?
Well, I know that I get bills from either my co-loaders or from the carriers, and then I pass those on to the customers. That's what most of everybody does, and that's actually something that causes a lot of issues. Um, it's a thing. We don't have time for me to get into
Yeah.
it, but when it comes to the dispute process, that can cause problems for the shippers if the shippers paid the forwarder, blah blah blah. So yes, that's what happens. We're kind of like we're the middleman. I mean, we're
Mhm.
not kind of, we are the middleman.
Yeah.
And so the carriers, ocean carriers, or the co-loaders send the bills to us, and then we have to send the bills to our customers and have them pay it. I get a lot of I work actually for a lot of freight forwarders and NVOCCs who don't pass on these bunk bills to their customers and will fight it so that the customer never has to see it. um, and but there's also in turn a lot of forwarders out there who figure it's not my money, So I'm just going to pass the bill on, even if I know it's, it
Yeah.
was a bunk charge and they're going to pay it anyway. So it kind of creates those issues at the same time, but good on my forwarder friends who don't do that.
Yeah, no, for sure. It is. It's I'm learning a lot about this whole process now because drayage is becoming a very big piece of our business right now, and it's I'm learning the ins and outs of it. And I always try and do this to put this information out there for people, Sarah, so they can start asking the right questions in their operation and start at being more prepared before they go in and think like, oh, there's a lot of containers, I should just be a drayage broker and all of a sudden do that. And then it's
Yeah.
like these fees add up very, very quickly. It's a lot different than domestic US full truckload. It's a lot different than LTL. It's a whole other thing. And like these fees, they add up quick, and it gets to the point that you are unable to even, like I said, you can't even remove these containers unless you pay the fee up front. And then brokers, freight brokers, I'm talking about here, if you're doing that, like you're the one who has to physically go in there and pay that, right? So be aware of that. And especially, I would advise people, if a customer comes to you and says, hey, we have some containers already ready to be picked up at the port, I would ask about all of this information about the free day, detention, demurrage, all of that stuff before you agree to any of that. Because if you agree and you quote that, and then that driver shows up and there's $500 in demurrage fees that are already assessed to that, you're going to have to pay that before you can even release that container. These are things you guys all need to be aware of before you just kind of go out there and say, oh, I'm going to start brokering containers now because like there's a lot of volume.
Yeah, and the new rule is supposed to fix that, where the truckers aren't getting billed for it, but on the ground we're not seeing that happening. I'm seeing a lot of my drayage friends posting about how they're still having to do it, and now that the carriers have taken over, the ocean carriers have taken over kind of like the billing process, it's gotten even worse. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of complexities, and I always say that drayage truckers, they are the front line. They're the
Yes.
front line for the shipper, and they're the front line for the forwarder. And this burden has kind of been placed on them too, where take away all the other complexities, right? Like they are now the first kind of like place where we have to go now to get like our evidence and to get our proof and all this other stuff. So the burden's on the drayage providers now to do things that they shouldn't have to do. Collect evidence, collect proof, screenshots if they have them, this, that, and the other, in order to pass it on to their customers, because then their customers are going to be mad and say, well, you said you couldn't get an appointment, or you said this, that, or the other, but like I have no proof, so I can't fight it now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So now that kind of has everybody in a way at each other's throats. And the burden has now it was supposed to be taken off of the truckers, but a whole new like kind of set of responsibilities and burdens has been placed on them now, because everything has kind of, and I said to people, that this new rule was kind of a gift to the carriers, because now everybody else, the shippers and the truckers, and are kind of having to squabble amongst themselves, and the carriers are just kind of sitting back and sending the bills out. So much respect for my drayage providers. They work really hard,
Oh yeah.
and I'm just part of my work is trying to make things easier on them. I've got things I'm cooking up, we'll talk about maybe at
Yeah.
another time, that'll make things easier for them, and just kind of make the process better for everybody involved, so that we have an equal supply chain for everybody, and nobody's able to take advantage of anybody else, and everybody's able to fight equally.
I love it. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. How does anybody reach out to you to find out more about what you got going on?
Well, I feel like I live on LinkedIn sometimes. Otherwise, just Sara, Sara, at 411 spelled out .io.
Perfect. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow, you guys. We're going to be talking about this again. We're going to continue to bring this out there, you guys, to help prepare people for what's possibly going to happen here in the coming weeks in the event that there is a strike, and in the event it does last a very prolonged amount of time. So we're going to get everybody up to speed on that. Reach out to Sarah. As always, if you guys got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out there to your network, because if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.